Hello everybody, it's Kara from Wild Book Garden, and today I'm here with part one of my very late March wrap-up. All of the content warnings for the books I talk about will be in the description, as well as people and videos that I mention, and let's just get right into it. I'm not gonna review these first few books here because they are all part of another collab that I was in, or that I was a part of, and those are The Lies of Locke Lamora by Scott Lynch, and then the second and third books in the Infernal Devices trilogy, which are Clockwork Prince and Clockwork Princess. If you want to know if I was fooled by the booktube hype, go ahead and check out that video. It's basically like the last one in that it's a wrap-up format rather than more of a traditional vlog, so if you want my reviews for those, go check out that video. I will link the playlist of all of our videos, and let's get into the books I'm actually going to talk about. The first book I finished in March was Along the Saltwise Sea by A. Deborah Baker. This is the second book in the Up and Under series, I think it's called, which is a portal fantasy series by Shauna McGuire, aka A. Deborah Baker. And I explained before, it's like this series exists in the world of the Middle Game series, which I haven't read, but this definitely stands on its own. This series does, and this is the second book, so I can't really get into specifics, but there's more adventure. Our two main characters, Avery and Zib, in the first book end up crossing over into this world called the Up and Under, which is very strange, very whimsical, and also very dangerous. And so in this second book, they are still adventuring, still trying to get home. And I liked this one more than the first book. I give it 3.5 stars again, but it's a higher 3.5 because I have been really enjoying some things about these books, but they're not completely landing for me. I mentioned in the review for the first one that part of it might be timing, because I am also finishing up the Fairyland series by Catherine M. Valente, and I feel like that series has like a similar kind of writing style and whimsy, but I think like executes it better, or executes it more in a way that I enjoy. So maybe this book suffered by comparison, but I will say that I enjoyed the side characters and the overall plot of this book a lot more than in the first one. I still have issues with how I feel like the author is trying to force us to like Zib more than Avery, and I just want my poor boy to be left alone with his like clean shoes and pocket protectors and everything. I like Zib as well, but it bothers me that I feel like the book is trying to make you have her as the favorite instead of Avery, and I don't like that. Also, the writing style is a little much for me sometimes, which is funny because the Fairyland series is definitely like that sometimes, but this one just feels a little more forced to me. I did, though, really love the writing section of one of the chapters that was like a story that characters were telling. I loved that. I wish the whole book had been written like that. And then I also feel like this book feels kind of repetitive. Like, a lot of the same things kind of are happening, and the overall point of this book feels the same as the first one, which I don't love, but enjoying the series, just not like an all-time favorite, and as I said, 3.5 stars. Next, I finished the Popol Vuh for Children, or Popol Vuh para Niños. This is a trilingual edition, and this is a really cool picture book. It is telling the story of the Popol Vuh, which is a very important story in Mesoamerican cultures and history. This was a present from my lovely friend Mariana from Mariana Mas Books, and as I said, this is trilingual, so I read the English version, but it's also in Spanish and in Nahuatl, which is very cool. I also liked the art style. I just thought this was such a cool thing to read and experience. You'll see in the rest of this video and the other wrap-ups for March that I read a lot of really wonderful picture books, and thank you again, Mariana. I really enjoyed reading this. Next, I finished Kind of Sort of Fine by Spencer Hall. This is a contemporary book following our two main characters, who, let me check their names, Hayley Mills, which I keep thinking of the actress, but no relation as far as I know, and Lewis Holbrook, and they're both in high school and just kind of trying to make it through. Lewis is kind of used to being the like funny fat kid, like nobody really takes him seriously, but he really wants to make this like his year, where he, you know, like gets the girl because he's had a crush on his one of his best friends for a long time. And then our other main character, Hayley, she had a very public, basically mental breakdown at the end of the school year previously, and that's basically what she's known for now. Like, she's been this really high achieving student, she's been involved in a lot of things, but now what people are remembering her for is the fact that she had this very public breakdown, and so she's determined to like leave that behind her, just like move on. She's trying to tell people that she wasn't pushing herself too hard, it's fine, and the two of them end up paired up to work together in a TV production class. which neither of them are happy about at first, but they end up becoming friends and seeing that the other person understands them more than they thought. And I really loved this. I feel like YA contemporaries get so much shit, and I feel like they can be really, really wonderful stories. I think this book really nailed the feeling of being in high school and like not wanting people to know you for only one thing, or just like wanting to be more than like what people see you as or stereotype you as. I really loved our main characters, and I think this has to be one of the best female points of view written by a male author that I've ever read. Like, I think Spencer Hall did a great job of writing both protagonists, and I was really impressed with the way that he wrote Haley, just because, you know, male authors writing female point of view characters doesn't always go great, but I thought this was great. I really enjoyed the writing and the humor as well. As I said, I loved our two leads. I really liked the friendships in this book. I think these were done really well, and I also think this book did a great job of kind of showing both sides of the various like things that these characters are struggling with. So like Haley, for example, is like so fixated on this like humiliating experience she had, I think for very good reason, for understandable reasons. And the book shows that she is justified in that, but then also you can see other characters' point when they start getting frustrated because of the way that Haley is like making choices because of that. Like, I just thought that was great. We also had some good like therapy rep or mental health rep here, and I really connected to Haley and like the whole like overachiever thing and stress and all of that. But yeah, I thought this was great. Really the only thing I didn't care for is I feel like there was some internalized fat phobia that wasn't really completely challenged. Like I mentioned that Lewis has always been like the fat, you know, sidekick or the funny best friend, and he wants to be like more than that. And so he starts like exercising and trying to eat differently and everything, and taking care of your body is important. Like, that's not a bad thing, but I feel like the way it was written in the story, it didn't fully challenge the fact that like, okay, well, he still would have been worthy of the things that he's pursuing if he hadn't lost weight, you know, because he does start losing weight, and I just felt like that was a little weird. But overall, I loved this, and I gave kind of sort of fine 4.5 stars. Next, I read Tomatoes for Neela by Padma Lakshmi, illustrated by Juana Martinez Neal. This is an absolutely stunning picture book. Let's see. She was also the illustrator for Fry Bread, if you recognize her art style. And this is just a really beautiful, warm, like moving book about family and food and culture and the importance of all of those things and the connection of all of those things. I just thought this was really beautiful, and I also love the focus on like knowing where your food comes from and like appreciating the people who make it possible for you to get your food, like farm workers and things like that. I just thought this was absolutely gorgeous, and I give Tomatoes for Neela 5 stars. One of the things that I wanted to do for this year's Middle Grade March was read more picture books, and I definitely did that, as you guys will see. Then I finished The Spare Man by Mary Robinette Kowal. This was one of the books I read for Tour.comathon, which I was a co-host for. Several of these books actually count for that. This is basically a sci-fi plus murder mystery. Our main character, Tesla, is a brilliant inventor, but she's had some things happen in the past that have now made her stop all of that kind of work. And she and her new husband, what is his name? Shaul, that's his name. They're on their honeymoon, and they're looking forward to just getting some time to themselves when there is a murder on board, and Shaul ends up being the prime suspect, or kind of the only suspect. Tesla knows that he didn't do this, and so she decides to take matters into her own hands and figure out who really killed this person, and prove her husband's innocence. She also has a really adorable service dog that you can see there. This book does have disability rep, which is Own Voices, and I really liked the way that was like worked into the story and how like that informed Tesla's character, but she also just wasn't purely her disability. And this was a really interesting book. I really enjoyed it overall. I really liked the mystery element, and I feel like the author did a fantastic job of like dropping the plot developments at exactly the right moments. And there were several times where like right as I was starting to catch on to what was happening, she would like reveal another piece, and I just feel like that was a great balance of like, aha, I knew it, and also like being surprised, which I tend to like in mysteries. I also thought the characterization was good. I did quite like Tesla as a protagonist, although I wish the conversations on privilege had been maybe handled a little more thoroughly. Like, the book does talk about that, and I appreciated seeing Tesla, like, she doesn't want to be like that rich girl, you know, but she's like, well, if you're refusing to even consider the evidence and the possibility that my husband is innocent, then fine, I'm going to use my money and privilege to make you pay attention. So I do understand that and I respect that, but I wish that the conversations about privilege and class had maybe been a bit more of a thing. I also thought the world was really well thought out without being like overly technical. And I also thought, like, in terms of the world building and the setting, the casual diversity in this book was great. Like, we have just like references or like descriptions or like side characters that are like different ethnicities, different races, different sexualities and gender identities and religions and all of those things, and it's just like not a big deal, which I thought was really cool. I also really loved some of the side characters. I mentioned Gimlet the service dog was absolutely adorable, and then I also really loved Tesla's lawyer and best friend Fantine. She's hilarious. She's like this really brilliant angry lawyer who like crochets aggressively into the camera as she's like waiting for people to call her back, and she's just so funny. Like, she's like cussing constantly, but then she's also always talking about like, oh, I'm gonna have to confess this to my priest again. Like, she just was a really funny character. Like, her contradictions felt very like real. She actually reminded me a tiny bit of Fizzy from the Soulmate Equation, except that I actually liked Fantine and I found Fizzy insufferable. So go figure. But yeah, I really enjoyed that as well. And I also liked that Tesla and Shal had just such a healthy relationship. Like, there's a lot of conflict in this book, but it's not like unnecessary relationship angst, which I appreciated. That is, though, the main thing that didn't work for me in this book was just the romance itself. Like, I didn't mind that there wasn't like relationship conflict, really. I kind of expected this to happen because I'm not usually invested when a couple has already gotten together. I don't really care about that part, so that also happened here. And then also I had some mixed feelings about the way the mystery element was eventually kind of solved or came together. Like, there were some parts at the end that I just think were a little wild. And I don't feel like, I don't know, there were things that like came out of nowhere, and like the series of like coincidences, it just seemed a little silly to me. I'm not a reader who's usually bothered by coincidences, but this was one where I'm like, okay, really? And then I also feel like the plot itself felt a little slow sometimes. Like, this book is not super long, it's only about 350 pages, but it felt really long to me, and I think that's because it was just so slow. We had so much like downtime waiting for another thing to happen or waiting for somebody to finally answer Tesla's questions. And like, it does make sense why people would be obstructing Tesla and like what she wants to do, but that didn't make for a super engaging reading experience sometimes. So it sounds like I had a very mixed experience, but overall I did really enjoy this book, and I gave The Spare Man 4 stars. Next, I read Squad by Maggie Tokuda Hall and Lisa Sturl. This is a graphic novel. Let me show you the art style, which I did enjoy. And this is about a new girl named Becca who moves to a fancy new high school, and she ends up falling in with the popular girls. She didn't expect that to happen. She's never really gotten along with, I don't know, the like queen bees of the schools that she's been to, but they kind of end up taking her under their wing, and eventually she ends up finding out that they actually are werewolves. And Becca kind of has to decide what she wants to do about that. She also sees how they are kind of using these abilities in different ways and to punish or to go after different people. And she's like, you know, she ends up joining them, but then she starts having doubts about what they're doing. I feel like that was a very messy summary, but I am very conflicted about this graphic novel. In my notes where I normally write like the star rating, I just have like 3 question marks because like I really don't know how I feel about this. Like, I think the concept was really interesting, and I thought the discussions of like revenge and like what is justified was interesting as well. I liked some of the relationships and side characters, and I also really liked the ending, like the way that like the very, I think like last few pages or like last section almost, that kind of elevated the rest of the story for me. Like, that came together in a way that I found really satisfying, and so that's one of the things that makes me feel more positive about the story overall. But I don't know, I just have very mixed feelings on what this graphic novel was doing, and what it was maybe trying to say. Like, I don't know. That's what the bottom line is. I don't know. So part of a blurb on the back asks how far a girl should go to hunt the hunters. And I feel like that's actually a really good way to sum up what this story is doing. And I guess my mixed feelings come from the fact that I don't know how well it lived up to that exploration, like how thoroughly it did that, or convincingly. I don't know. I have probably said the words I don't know like 12 times while reviewing this graphic novel. If you've read this one, let me know what you think, because obviously I'm conflicted. Next, I read another graphic novel. There was actually a weekend like Graphicsathon or something that I was theoretically participating in, except that I didn't actually finish any graphic novels during the readathon. But I did read several during the month, so I guess that kind of counts. I read the first volume of the Phantom of the Opera graphic novel, written and illustrated by Becky Laff. This is one that I backed on Kickstarter, and I was very excited to have it in my hands and get to read it. So this is an adaptation, part one of an adaptation of the Phantom of the Opera, and it's a combination, like one of the things actually I really loved about it is that I think Becky Laff did a really fantastic job of pulling elements from the original like classic novel and then also from like the stage show and adaptations and things. I thought that was done really well. And so we're following our main character Christine Daae, who her father was a musician, and at this point he has died, and Christine is a chorus girl in the Paris Opera, like in the one of the Paris opera houses, and she starts getting tutored by this mysterious angel of music. That's who Christine believes this is. Her father said that he would send the angel of music to her to help her sing better. And so she thinks that that's what's happening. And of course it's not. It's actually the Phantom of the Opera, and we learn more about him. And then also Christine's childhood crush, Raoul, who is the Vicomte. He comes back and declares himself to Christine. So they have all of these like conflicting interpersonal relationships too. I just realized I don't think I've ever summarized the Phantom of the Opera story before, and I did a very bad job with that. But probably a lot of people are familiar with kind of the overall story. And as I said, this is part one of an adaptation, and I really loved this. I really enjoyed the use of color. Most of the graphic novel is in black and white, but then there are like red kind of highlights and elements that I think were done really well. I think this graphic novel did a really good job of showing the danger and the toxicness of the relationship between Christine and Eric, or the Phantom. I do wish that it had shown a little bit more about like how I feel like Raoul's relationship with her is also not great. There was a little bit about that, but I think there could have been more, because I have some issues with the way Raoul behaves as well. But overall, I did really love this, and I gave this volume 4.5 stars. I think you might be able to buy this like as a regular book now. If you can, I will link that below. Then another couple of beautiful picture books. I read The Secret Garden, illustrated by Adelina Lirius, which is of course based on the novel by Frances Hodgson Burnett. This was a birthday present from my wonderful friend Julia at Shakespeare and Such. She knows how much I love The Secret Garden, and this was just an absolutely gorgeous picture book adaptation. I loved the art. I love this story. I think it did a really like surprisingly good job of like condensing the story without like losing too much of it. And the reason I say surprising is just because it's a decently sized novel, and to condense that into, you know, 32 pages or whatever, I think is very impressive. And I also really liked how we got a fairly good feeling for Mary Lennox as a character, even though again this is so short. Like, I love Mary, I love that little brat so much. So I really enjoyed how true to character she felt here. But yeah, I thought this was stunning. I gave The Secret Garden 5 stars. Then I also read Eyes That Kiss in the Corners by Joanna He, illustrated by Dong He. This is another really beautiful picture book. Let me show the illustration style. It's lovely. This is about a young girl who, she looks different than some of the other kids, and it talks about how that's beautiful, how she has eyes that kiss in the corners. Yeah, so it says a young girl notices that her eyes look different from her friends, and it's just about the girl, like our main character, realizing that not only is that okay, but that is beautiful and something to celebrate and something that connects her to her family. And it's just absolutely gorgeous. Like, ugh, this picture book makes me so happy. I think it hasn't won a couple of awards. I'm not sure. It should. But yeah, I give this 5 stars. Just, I read some really, really incredible picture books this month, you guys. If you haven't picked one up in a while as an adult, highly recommend. Then I finished History Smashers, The Mayflower by Kate Messner, illustrated by Dylan McConis. I have talked several times now about this series of nonfiction that is for like younger readers. It's like there are some pretty big illustrations, but there is a decent amount of text as well. So I wouldn't say this is like an early reader kind of nonfiction, but it is for kids, but you can still learn a lot as an adult. I always do. And this is about the Mayflower and myth busting, some of the like origin stories, origin legends of the United States, and specifically the Pilgrims and like the early kind of colonial era. And I think this is a really fantastic series of nonfiction. I definitely recommend this if you have like kids in your life, but as I said, even if you're an adult who does not. I just find these really engagingly written, really interesting. I think they do a really wonderful job of explaining these concepts to kids in appropriate ways that still don't gloss over or sugarcoat things. So yeah, I thought this was another fantastic installment in the series, and I gave History Smashers The Mayflower 5 stars. And finally, the last book I'm going to talk about for this wrap-up is The Night Fairy by Laura Amy Schlitz, illustrated by Angela Barrett. Let me show an example of the illustrations, which were a really lovely touch. I basically picked this up because I have loved 2 other books that I've read by Laura Amy Schlitz, and I had made up my mind I wanted to read pretty much everything she's written, and that was really the only reason I picked this up. Like, it wasn't like, I probably wouldn't have picked this up if I hadn't already had those experiences, just because I didn't have any particular interest in this. It is a very short fairy story about our main character Flory, who one day loses her wings. Something happens to her where she doesn't have her wings anymore, and so it's about her trying to figure out a way to like survive on her own, and it's about her like slowly kind of starting to explore her new environment and like meet some of the other animals. There's also some danger, and I just ended up loving this so much more than I thought. Like, I was really, really impressed at the level of characterization, because again, this is a pretty short story, but I really love Flory. She also is kind of a brat. She actually reminded me a little bit of Mary Lennox, maybe because I had just read that picture book shortly before this, but she is not always a pleasant character, but it's in a way that feels so intentional, and I feel like her character arc was really lovely. I also really enjoyed the moments of humor in this story. I wasn't necessarily expecting that either. I guess basically I didn't know what to expect from this book is what I should say, because it's not like I had low expectations. I just didn't know what this book was going to be, or how I would feel about it, but I really enjoyed it. I also really loved some of the supporting characters, and Flory, like seeing Flory learn that sometimes allies and friends are not who you expect, and also how sometimes you can't make friends with everybody, you know, but not in like a depressing way, just like, I don't know. It was really interesting. The only thing I didn't love about this is there's some parts of the ending that I feel like play a little bit into some ableist tropes. Not completely, like I think the way it's done is definitely not as blatant as that can sometimes be, but I don't think we had to do it that way, so I didn't love that. But overall, I did really enjoy this, and I gave The Night Fairy 4.5 stars. Okay, everybody, so that was part 1 of my wrap-up. Please comment down below, let me know if you have read any of these books, what you thought of them, or if you're going to pick them up, and let me know if you have read Squad, what you thought of it, and or let me know a book that you read that, like, it's not just like you have mixed feelings on it, you're like, I really cannot sum up my feelings on it. Like, I am so conflicted that I don't know how I feel, because obviously I'm struggling with that one. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!